Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and with the preseason in the rear view mirror, I'm going to share my final San Francisco 49ers 2025 53-man roster prediction. Going to break down each and every position, maybe even give you some trade candidates and some surprise makes and surprise cuts, while also maybe getting into some prime trade candidates that are currently on the roster. Also, going to give you an in-depth and in-detail reason for each and every player I have making this roster, hoping to be as accurate as possible. The goal of this is to try to predict what San Francisco does on tomorrow's, that being Tuesday's, roster cut down day. So without further ado, let's dive into today's show. But first, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave us that 5-star audio podcast review. And shall I begin today with some really good news for the San Francisco 49ers? A lot of the offseason and the preseason and training camp has been derailed by injuries. San Francisco has somewhat survived the last 3-4 weeks or so with the intact roster for the most part. But today, the final practice before roster cut down day, the injury bug may have stepped aside for at least one practice session because we did get a lot of returning players for the San Francisco 49ers today, including first-round pick Micah Williams, standout mid-round pick defensive tackle CJ West, Richie Grant, Fabian Moreau, Mac Jones, and Ben Barch were all back in uniform today and practicing. We also got news that Dominic Pooney and Upton Stout were doing pretty rigorous workouts on the sideline today, so even more good news for San Francisco. And thankfully, nobody else got hurt. Brian Robinson made his Niners practice debut. And while there are still players to wait and see who comes back in the next week and a half or so prior to week one, San Francisco is getting healthy at the right time, leading into the season opener against the Seattle Seahawks. But with all that out of the way, let's dive in to my final 53-man roster predictions for the San Francisco 49ers in 2025. And the team has already waived a handful of players today, including 2 quarterbacks, and that is where we start off today's show and the predictions because, again, it's a really easy prediction here. The San Francisco 49ers will carry franchise quarterback Brock Purdy and Mac Jones as their QB1 and QB2. I believe 7th-round pick Curtis Rourke will begin the year and probably spend the entire year on the NFI list this season, while I do have Tanner Mordecai, not Carter Bradley, returning on the practice squad. There is no other way to put this. The only reason Carter Bradley will find himself and should find himself back on the roster is nepotism. While yes, Tanner Mordecai was not great in the first preseason game against the Broncos, and there has been an uptick in play from Bradley the final 2 preseason games, it's not enough. Mordecai, to me, has been on the roster for now 2-ish years or so, spent the entire last season with San Francisco, already knows what it's like to be in the offense, in the system, has maybe a little bit more trust from his banged-up wide receiver room, and outperformed Bradley in almost every which way. I thought Mordecai ended preseason week 3 on a very strong note, and I think should be this team's emergency quarterback 3 if he has to play. He's a practice squad guy. You elevate him. I do not think Carter Bradley will be anywhere near San Francisco's roster, at least after roster cut down day. I have 3 quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, Mac Jones, and Tanner Mordecai on the practice squad this year, with Curtis Rourke on the NFI list, not counting towards the 53-man roster. Going down further on the depth chart, we have the running back position. And while maybe there were questions as to who is the RB4 coming into the year, that no longer exists. We now have a very solidified group of running backs behind Christian McCaffrey, who is, by just the obvious way, the bell cow back, the RB1, the former offensive player of the year. He will headline the running back room. Behind him will be running back number 2, as Shanahan already told us after the preseason game against the Chargers, newly acquired Brian Robinson. Behind Brian Robinson is Isaac Guerendo and rookie Jauan Jennings. I do have San Francisco carrying both Corey Kiner and Patrick Taylor Jr. on season-ending injured reserve this season. So you get to stash Kiner for a whole year, hopefully bring him back next year and figure things out once Brian Robinson is a free agent. And maybe you like Kiner enough to replace somebody like Isaac Guerendo, whose stock is right now in the dumps. And Patrick Taylor Jr., a guy that somehow will stick around for a while. Shanahan likes some consistency on the back end of the running back room. So both those guys on IR. Then I think I would probably be in the camp of the entire fan base that agrees El Jefe, Jeff Wilson Jr. needs to be on the practice squad this year. He looked phenomenal in preseason. He's thinner. The burst is still evident when he runs the football. He was finding holes better than Jauan Jennings and Isaac Guerendo when they had their very, very, very small glimpses of the field. And I think there is a way Jeff Wilson Jr. becomes the RB3 this season if one of those guys, James or Guerendo, go down. But to begin the year, McCaffrey, Brian Robinson, Isaac Guerendo, and Jauan Jennings are your 4 running backs, and Jeff Wilson Jr. occupies the first of a very limited group of veteran guys on the practice squad. Love El Jefe. He was phenomenal in the preseason. I think he belongs with the San Francisco 49ers, and I think he can get past waivers this season. And again, 2 positions already down, and let's continue with the fullback room. It's Kyle Juszczyk. The juice will hopefully be loose all year long. He's one of the most underrated parts of the offense. He does so much. He's like having a second quarterback on the field or a second center on the field. He is so useful to this offense. Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, Jake Brendel, Kyle Juszczyk. Again, one of the easy ones here is going to make the roster this season. And he kind of serves as another tight end to Kyle Shanahan, hence why, skipping receiver for 1 second, I only have San Francisco carrying 3 tight ends this year to at least begin the season. George Kittle, Hall of Famer, perennial All-Pro, perennial Pro Bowler. He is, in my mind, the best current tight end in football. Ahead of Brock Bowers, albeit Brock Bowers is awesome out there in Las Vegas. May have about 300 targets this year if they trade Jacoby Myers, but they also just signed Amari Cooper. Get to him in 1 second. But George Kittle, Luke Farrell, and I have Braden Willis like I have the entire preseason, outbidding Jake Tunges for a final roster spot at the tight end position. I do have them bringing back Jake Tunges on the practice squad. I think Jake can give San Francisco a little bit more of a receiving threat than Willis or Farrell can. So if someone else goes down, I do believe Jake Tunges finds himself on the practice squad and could be an elevation on a week-to-week basis. But pretty straightforward there. However, where things get really tricky for San Francisco is the wide receiver position, because on paper, this room is loaded. However, injuries have run roughshod through the entire room. You have suspensions, IR stints, PUP list guys. There are a lot of questions as to who is going to be lined up alongside Ricky Pearsall week 1 of the NFL season for the San Francisco 49ers. And obviously, I already said Pearsall, he's making the list. But right now, I have who I think will be back, Jauan Jennings. I think he'll be back by week 1 if you are in the camp that does not believe the injury. I know Dre Area Sports here in the YouTube chat, not a fan of Jauan Jennings holdout and does not buy into the injury news that he actually is hurt or it is that severe. However, I think Jauan will be back. He cannot afford to miss games this year because there's little guaranteed money on his contract. He's not going to hit the incentive marks. It hurts him if he is healthy to actively hold out. I don't believe what Tim Kawakami said is accurate in regards to maybe Jauan Jennings being placed on injured reserve. Who does that help? Nobody, unless Jauan is actually hurt. And in that case, you are burning one of your IR designated returns on Jauan Jennings before the year even starts. You don't love that. I think Ricky Pearsall is out there. I believe Jauan Jennings will be back. Russell Gage, I think, has earned a spot on this year's 53-man roster, at least to begin the year, and hopefully to get them to Brandon Aiyuk and DeMarcus Robinson. Skyy Moore, newly acquired last week, he'll make the roster, and I think he usurps Junior Burgeon on the final 53-man roster spot as the primary return man, at least on punts, to begin the season. I also have rookie wide receiver Jordan Watkins making the roster. No surprise there, but he was on the sideline today, working his way back. So again, more good news for San Francisco. Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jordan Watkins, Russell Gage, and Skyy Moore. Yes, only 5 wide receivers going to be on the roster for San Francisco this season, at least to begin the season. However, I do have Brandon Aiyuk beginning this year on the PUP list, and DeMarcus Robinson obviously being suspended for 3 games. I know he's trying to appeal that decision, maybe gets it reduced to 2 games, but you're not going to have Aiyuk, you're not going to have Robinson to begin the year. Thus, I have them keeping Gage and others on the roster. I do have Jacob Cowing, which it seems pretty obvious now, being placed on injured reserve. I'm not sure when this will take place. It does feel like it'll take place directly after the roster cut down deadline to hopefully preserve his season and not make him a season-ending IR stint. However, he goes on IR, and I do have San Francisco retaining 2 players on the practice squad to hopefully elevate in the first handful of weeks during the year. The first one seems pretty obvious in my opinion, that being Robbie Chosen Anderson. There is maybe a conversation to have of San Francisco retaining 6 wide receivers to begin the year. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Robbie Chosen Anderson is a practice squad elevation the first 3 weeks of the season. And the next one, the reason why I have Junior Burgeon back on the practice squad is, one, I don't know exactly how much faith the roster has in Skyy Moore, at least Kyle Shanahan has in Skyy Moore to stick around the entire year. I do believe they think Junior Burgeon is worthy of hanging around because they've had so many problems in the punt game, in the return game. I know he muffed that punt against the Chargers, but I do think they believe in Junior Burgeon enough to be on the roster. And had you had Brandon Aiyuk healthy, Jauan Jennings status not in doubt, and DeMarcus Robinson not suspended, there is a spot for Junior Burgeon on that stacked roster. However, because those guys are out for the variety of reasons they value having Skyy Moore, who can also be a receiver where Junior Burgeon is not ready just yet. So I have Burgeon back on the practice squad. You never know when you're going to have another return man. Guerendo's often injured. Pearsall, you don't want to have him back there on punts, and you have Skyy Moore. Why not carry Junior Burgeon on the practice squad? He's not going to take up too many spots for you. It makes the most sense to me, and it limits how many veteran guys you carry on the practice squad, where players like Malik Turner, who had a really good game against the Chargers this past weekend, and Isaiah Hodgins may be both worthy of that spot, but both those guys have played too long, in my opinion, to be a veteran designation on the practice squad and don't offer much for you unless you don't want to carry another defensive lineman or offensive lineman, which we'll get to those guys in a second. I do want to pause to say what's up to Kenny 49ers. How you doing, brother? Dre Area Sports, Kyle Chipto, and Big Brick 84, while also saying hello to Fish and Chips, who says, don't carry JR anyways. And Big Brick says, hey, Sterling. And the faithful Dre Sports says, smash the like button and subscribe to 49ers Access. And he also asks, do you think Jauan Jennings starts week 1? I do. It benefits both parties for him to be out there. And it honestly hurts Jauan Jennings, unless he's actually injured, to not be out there against the Seahawks. This, to me, is his final week of leverage. He doesn't have much anymore anyways, but I think JJ makes his way back to the team next week, leading into the season opener against the Seattle Seahawks. Already did tight ends. Let's move on to the offensive line, because just like wide receiver, the offensive line is a really big discussion point amongst the fan base. And I've gone back and forth. Who do I think makes as depth guys? Because the starters are already set, right? Trent Williams is there at left tackle. Ben Bartch was practicing today. He'll be there at left guard to begin the season. Jake Brendel obviously is your center. Dominic Puni seemingly on track to be back by week 1. He is your right guard, and Colton McKivitz is your starting right tackle. That's all fine. We know who those guys are. You may dislike those players, and I don't disagree with you at times, mainly Brendel and Bartch, but the depth to me is the issue. This team has not been able to run the football very effectively in preseason, simply because of them being backups in, so you can forgive them at times, but the guards have been a concern, whether it be Nick Zakelj, who was absolutely terrible during the preseason. You have some young guys you like a lot, like Connor Colby, this year's 7th-round draft pick, who I think overperformed in the preseason. You also have Drew Moss, who this fan base seems to be enamored with. Do you keep 8 offensive linemen? Do you keep 9? Do you keep 10? What does San Francisco do? Can they afford to lose a younger talent like Drew Moss? Are they okay keeping Nick Zakelj if he is indeed the backup center? A lot goes into the decision, and I think I may have figured it out. I may not like my solution to those questions we all have, but right now I have obviously Trent Williams, Ben Bartch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Puni, and Colton McKivitz as your starting 5. I think 2 pretty clear-cut guys to make the roster are backup left tackle Spencer Burford and rookie guard Connor Colby. Whether it be right guard, left guard, Connor Colby, to me, has been one of the biggest surprises thus far through the preseason. He'll make the roster guaranteed. Then this team right now does not have a backup right tackle outside of Austin Pleasance. He, while I don't think is a shoo-in to make the roster, I do think San Francisco may be a little aggressive on the waiver wire, find a right tackle. I think Logan Brown got cut by the Vikings. Maybe that's an option for them, but without knowing that could happen or will happen for them, I have Austin Pleasance making the 53-man roster as the backup right tackle. Then this is where things get tricky, because to my own demise, I have Nick Zakelj making the roster. I know, tomato, boomy, I get it. I don't want to do it either. I would rather have San Francisco retain Drew Moss. I would retain Drew Moss on this list. I think Drew Moss should be retained. He can play right guard, left guard. I would also retain Matt Hennessy. However, I have San Francisco retaining Matt Hennessy on the practice squad via one of the veteran spots. He'll be your third center in case of emergency if somebody goes down, or if Zakelj has to play guard for a game, if Colby's hurt, whatever. You get what I'm saying. Hennessy becomes a much valued depth piece that can play center for you. Again, I would keep Hennessy and Drew Moss over Nick Zakelj, but this is what I think they will do on tomorrow's cutdown day. I have Isaac Alarson on the practice squad / suspended list to begin the year, so maybe San Francisco gets a break there with an extra tackle on the depth of the roster. So that to me is kind of a guarantee. You keep him in the building on the roster some way. Doesn't affect your actual, numbered rostered players. Doesn't it go against the final 53? But then in a perfect world, Drew Moss comes back on the practice squad. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't have them retaining him. But I think Drew Moss, as Khalil Young says here, will get claimed by somebody else. He will be this year's Jarrett Kingston. Again, I would not do that. I don't want to do that. I'd rather keep Drew Moss. And Kawachipto says here, Matt Hennessy has looked awful. I don't disagree with you, but they've had him for a 2-year contract. It's a practice squad guy. I think Hennessy has looked a lot better than Drake Nugent, who has not been great whatsoever the last couple of years. So that's the only reason why I believe Hennessy would be retained over Drake Nugent, and Nick Zakelj makes it over Hennessy. This team needs a backup center. Drew Moss hasn't done that, although he may be the body type for it right now in his first year. He's not there just yet. So I have them cutting Drew Moss. I have them cutting Hennessy, and I have Hennessy and Alarson being brought back via the practice squad / on the suspended list to begin the season. Big Brick 84 says starting 5 is set. Colby and Moss get a spot. Burford by default, and I guess you keep Zakelj as a backup center. However, they may find better depth from waivers to replace Zakelj, Burford, and Pleasance. I think they will have a hard time replacing Burford at left tackle behind Trent. They gave him more guaranteed money, but you can find replacements for Zakelj and Austin Pleasance. So it gets tricky. Offensive line, it gets really tricky. The depth is something San Francisco is going to have to maneuver in a big way, because I don't love Zakelj. I don't love Hennessy. I'd rather retain Drew Moss, but maybe San Francisco keeps one less tight end. Maybe they keep one less linebacker. A lot of decisions must be made, and I just don't think San Francisco, after scouting Nick Zakelj for 6 years at Fordham, are going to cut their losses, I think, as they should. But that is your offensive line. Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, Colton McKivitz, Nick Zakelj, Spencer Burford, Connor Colby, and Austin Pleasance. But of any position, waiver wire claims may come in to factor with them. Papa J in the YouTube chat says, "What's up, Sterling? What is up, Papa J?" He says, "Smash it, faithful. Smash that like button if you guys can." Kenny 49ers says, "Zakelj is a diaper filled with Indian food." Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I'm happy you're having fun with it. And the 49ers 2025 says, "What's up, Sterling? What is up, Papa J?" They also, "What's up, 49ers 2025?" They also ask here in the YouTube chat, what about Michael Dunn and Alarson? Alarson is going to make the roster via the practice squad / the suspended list. But Michael Dunn, to me, again, it all just comes down to, there's a lot going on here. A lot of ways they can go. There's vested free agents. It's a lot. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible for everybody out there. But that's who I have being this team's 9 offensive linemen, which we know by now, the 53-man roster on Tuesday will not be the final 53-man roster on Wednesday. Guys get cut, guys get hurt, guys go on injured reserve. Hence why I mentioned earlier, I'm not really sure exactly when they're going to put Cowing on IR. I can see them doing it after the cut down day to make sure he can be brought back during the year, because I think anybody that is put on IR before the season is a season-ending designation. So they have a lot of maneuvering to do with the current roster as we speak. But let's go to the defense, and let's talk about the defensive line, the trenches, where everything and the magic happens. If you're a fan of MTV Cribs, this is the bedroom for San Francisco. Every single guest says this is where the magic happens for San Francisco, especially on defense. And obviously, you're going to keep Nick Bosa, Alfred Collins, Micah Williams, Bryce Huff, and CJ West. But after those guys, a lot of questions. It seems like they are going to retain Samuel Kawanu. I thought Jordan Elliott was tremendous against the Chargers in his first preseason game this year. I know Kalia Davis has a small injury right now, but he's supposed to be back. I think he'll make the roster. I think they should bring back Evan Anderson. And that, to me, leaves one final roster spot. I think they will carry 10, yes, double-digit defensive linemen, but that final one is where things get tricky. because Kevin Givens and Bradley Aiyuk will both be on injured reserve to begin the season. It feels like Yetur Gross-Matos, with the recovery with his knees not going well, will be on the PUP list to begin the year. Thus, me asking the question, do you want to carry another edge rusher, or do you want to carry another interior defensive tackle? It seems like the solution to this for most fans is Sebastian Valdez. That, to me, I think makes the most sense from a logical standpoint. He looks awesome. He looks young, spry, strong. They called him Hulk for a reason during the preseason. I think he's done a heck of a job. However, I do wonder if the Yetur Gross-Matos recovery not going well does push San Francisco more towards retaining an edge rusher. You can always slide Michael inside on base downs, or on third downs, maybe giving you some more depth behind them. Again, I would keep Sebastian Valdez. I want to make that very clear here. However, I don't think San Francisco is going to do that. I do think he will get claimed, but in a perfect world, which this is a podcast before cutdown day, that perfect world still exists right now for San Francisco. And sometimes the NFL can surprise you and not claim players that you like. I have them not retaining Sebastian Valdez and hoping that they can maybe bring him back on the practice squad. And I do unfortunately have them retaining Robert Beal Jr. I know, more tomatoes. I just think right now San Francisco views Michael Williams as somebody that can go inside, give you versatility. Again, I would not do this. It's just what I think they will do tomorrow. I think they are going to hope to bring back Trevis Gibson on the practice squad via the veteran way of doing so, and I think they're hoping they can sneak Sebastian Valdez through. I would keep Sebastian Valdez and hopefully see if you can figure things out with Robert Beal Jr. after that, or just find somebody else. Beal Jr. is far and away replaceable. However, with maybe Michael Williams' knee and his ankle stuff, I just think edge rusher, to me, for them, they may find it a little more valuable. The 49ers 2025 says here, Larry Krueger wants Marlo Wax from the Chargers. Been an outstanding in the preseason. I'm not sure if he can fit another linebacker on the roster. I have them carrying 6 linebackers, so a 7th one probably is not in the running. But I do like where Krueger's head at. Obviously, it's also worth mentioning that preseason standouts don't always translate to the actual regular season. So I know we always get into kind of a ruckus, if you will, about, oh, they cut my favorite preseason guy. And that guy never gets claimed, never gets re-signed, and you never heard from him again. Thomas Clayton, Capri Bibbs, Dominic Ziegler, all these guys who were like, oh my God, they're Niner preseason heroes, never get brought back. Was it Marcelino McCrary Ball was a big one a couple of years ago. But that doesn't mean you cut young talent. I am in the camp that believes San Francisco should bet on, let's say, lower floor, higher talent, younger players when it comes to their depth, like Drew Moss over Nick Zakelj, cutting Beal Jr. in the case of retaining Sebastian Valdez. But this, again, is what I think they will do. I'm hoping I'm wrong. In this case, I really want to be wrong. But I do think they'll bring back Robert Beal Jr., and they will round out the defensive line room with Michael Williams, Nick Bosa, Alfred Collins, Bryce Huff, CJ West, Evan Anderson, Samuel Kawanu, Jordan Elliott, Kalia Davis, and Robert Beal Jr. They're going to hope to bring back, I believe, Trevis Gibson, be the veteran option for the practice squad, and Sebastian Valdez, an edge rusher and a defensive tackle on the practice squad. Yetur Gross-Matos goes on the PUP list, while Kevin Givens and Bradley Aiyuk go on injured reserve. Now's probably a good time to pause for 1 second to remind you to use this promo code right here on your screen or down below in the description at SeatGeek.com. Find your tickets. Green is good, red is bad, whether it's Niner tickets, other NFL tickets, baseball tickets. The playoffs are almost here. WNBA tickets, or maximizing what could be your final week of summer, going to a concert and whatnot. Find your tickets and use promo code 49ers Access, 49 ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Back to the YouTube chat for 1 second, because Big Brick 84 says Gibson is a vested veteran. He will not go on waivers. You are 1000% correct. No waivers, a release, then a retention on the practice squad. And the 49ers 2025 says we should keep Valdez. You never know, with how undrafted players, sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. I agree with you. However, San Francisco has been really weird about keeping and cutting late picks, and I think this applies to UDFAs as well. I would be in the camp, again, that would bank on Valdez being for real, but sometimes they want to thread that needle and it doesn't work out for them because they like the depth, let's say, a Beal Jr. gives them or Nick Zakelj gives them on the offense and defensive lines. But I am in the full keep Sebastian Valdez camp, but we shall see. Kyle Chipto says, here we are hearing they are trying to trade for corners, edges, and offensive line before roster cut down day tomorrow. This is probably a good time to get into the Amari Cooper report today from the Athletics' Diana Rossini, because she reported today, after Amari Cooper signed with the Raiders, that the San Francisco 49ers were in fact a team interested in signing him before he signed. So my assumption is that came down to price tag, but it does feel like San Francisco is trying to make some moves. They already traded for 2 guys, being Skyy Moore and Brian Robinson, but this is where kind of the roster spots 50, 51, 52, 53 become really kind of fluid of guys who can make the roster, get cut, or they acquire somebody else. Again, we can talk about trades now. I think you can get into conversations about Jair Brown being traded, Darrell Luter Jr. maybe being traded, or trying to trade one of your linebackers like Jalen Graham or Luke Gifford, maybe even Curtis Robinson. You never know. I do think San Francisco does have a little bit of depth that can net them something in return, whether it be a 7th round pick or whatnot. But I do think they have a handful of players that could maybe get them something in return instead of being cut outright. Maybe it's a team that's looking towards, like the Eagles are trading away a ton of players the last couple of days. You can see maybe a team like the Jets covet Jair Brown, bringing him back into a Steve Wilkes defense to maybe rekindle that 2023 magic. But I don't know if San Francisco can afford to trade Jair Brown now, maybe later. However, Big Brick 84 set up earlier in the YouTube chat, Yetur Gross-Matos, he has getting traded once he's healthy. Could be an option. You never know. I think San Francisco has plenty of moves to make. I know a lot of you in the YouTube chat are saying trade this guy, trade that guy because you want to retain Sebastian Valdez. It's all on the table. San Francisco should not be sitting back idly by, not making moves. They really should be a team trying to be active and find young, up-and-coming talent and move guys around. Obviously, you go get Brian Robinson and Skyy Moore, 2 under the radar, or at least cheaper options for the roster. I don't mind those deals, but I think the offensive line, again, maybe defensive line and cornerback are 3 spots I'd look for San Francisco to improve. Already on top of wide receiver, which I like the bodies they have there more than I think other fans do, but let's continue on with the notes, because let's get to linebacker next. You obviously have All-Pro Fred. He's the LB1. I mean, he's the best linebacker in football. Duh. Then next to him, you have D. Winters, who I think is in for a big breakout season if he can stay healthy. Then next to them, starting on base downs only, you have second-year linebacker Tatum Bethune making the roster. Maybe they dangle Bethune. I don't think so, though. Maybe you can read into them not playing him in the final preseason game. I said that was because he's going to start this year. That's still my assumption, but maybe they didn't play him because they didn't want him to get hurt. I don't know. I think he makes the roster. I think he's had a heck of a training camp in the preseason. So I think those are your three starters. Behind them, though, is Nick Martin, big breakout game against the Chargers in the final preseason game, and that built off of a pretty good game against the Raiders in week 2 of the preseason as well. Then you have Curtis Robinson, a big pick 6 against the Chargers in front of Navarro Bowman. That felt kind of like a solidification of his spot on the roster for this defense. And again, linebacker is a position where early on in preseason, I only had them carrying 5 linebackers. Now I have them carrying 6. So maybe you can pitch me on the idea of cutting Luke Gifford, maybe trying to trade him. I don't know if you can. I don't know who'd want him, but maybe trading Luke Gifford and only carrying, Martin, Robinson, Bethune, Winters, and Warner. That's certainly an option while trying to maintain some depth on the practice squad in case somebody goes down. I have on the practice squad for San Francisco, after their 6 linebackers, I had them retaining Stone Blanton, the standout UDFA, and I have them retaining Chazz Surratt. So maybe Luke Gifford finds himself playing elsewhere, whether it be via trade or a cut. That could afford you a spot to retain. Maybe it is Drew Moss or Sebastian Valdez. But right now, I think they're going to keep 6 linebackers. San Francisco usually does that during the year, at least to begin this season. Guys get hurt all the time. And especially with D. Winters having relatively injury-prone nature the last couple of seasons, it may be worth keeping 6 guys on the active roster. Kenny 49ers says, sign Shiloh Sanders. Funny enough, he sucks. I know his last name. I get it. It's Deion Sanders' kid. He was absolutely terrible during the preseason, a high missed tackle rate. If you look at PFF, terrible PFF scores. He was terrible. Bad in coverage, bad tackler. It got ejected from a game. Just no. Do not bring in Shiloh Sanders. No. By no means should they go bring in Shiloh Sanders. And Kenny also says, Shiloh's in his prime, Sterling. Well, he can sit his prime ass on the bench the rest of the season because I don't want him on the San Francisco 49ers. Continuing on, though, with another polarizing room because to no fault of their own, San Francisco has themselves in a pretty sticky situation at the cornerback spot. You like your starters. You like Lenore, Renardo Green, Upton Stout, Dallas Flowers is your backup outside cornerback. You're going to retain Chase Lucas. That's 5 guys right there. You like your 5. The question is, who is the 6th? After you lose Trey Brown, a guy assigned to potentially be your 3rd or 4th outside linebacker. He's done for the season. Then Jacob Robinson, a standout UDFA, which in this case, you kind of got lucky, although you wish he was healthy. He's going to go on injured reserve most likely and miss the entire year 2 via broken forearm. So you get to retain a really, really good young cornerback, in my opinion, in Jacob Robinson. But then you lose Trey Brown, a guy you were kind of banking on being your depth. Maybe San Francisco also trades Jalen Graham. He has looked a lot better this year. He can also be a practice squad guy, but he was claimed off waivers last year by the Commanders. So there's ways to move around there. I would like to retain him, but Stone Blanton, Chazz Surratt, Bethune, Winters, those guys. Jalen Graham to me is a trade candidate over making the roster, but I don't think he'll be on the practice squad either this season. Anyways, back to cornerback. Who is that last cornerback on your roster? To me, it's between 2 guys. You have Darrell Luter Jr., who I think looked better against the Chargers after a pretty rough couple 2 games to begin the preseason. Then there's Siran Neal. I have San Francisco retaining Surratt Neal over Darrell Luter Jr. I know Luter Jr. gives you some outside, cornerback depth behind Dallas Flowers. We did see them, I believe, play Chase Lucas out there for a little bit against Los Angeles this past Saturday. And Surratt Neal can also, and I think has played a pretty good outside cornerback, very physical play style. I believe Neal should make it over Darrell Luter Jr. Maybe a young and upcoming team or a building team takes a chance on Luter Jr. I can very easily see a team like the Saints, maybe a team like the Panthers, who are trying to grow their defense, who have poured a ton of money into it, maybe valuing Luter Jr. for a very cheap price, and want to avoid him going on waivers. So again, or being released and being on the open market. So I don't know who would value Luter Jr. that much, but San Francisco, I can see keeping him. However, in this case, I do think Surratt Neal has played good enough outside cornerback and gives you what you need on special teams to be retained. I love what Surratt Neal has done. I think Surratt Neal has been awesome. I think he's, while yes, not perfect in coverage, he's physical enough. And I know he's playing against third stringers and whatnot, but you can only go against who you're going against. He also gives you safety flexibility. That's an important part here. Like Surratt Neal being your sixth cornerback is probably not going to play much. That can also play safety. Does that afford you a spot to trade Jair Brown? They can go so many which directions, but getting to the safety room, I have them retaining Jair Brown, but I have Jason Pinnock and Marquise Siegel as your starting safeties to begin the year. Richie Grant being in the rotation behind Siegel and Pinnock with Jair Brown. And Mustafa will begin the season on the PUP list, while I do believe Jalen Mahoney will be retained via the practice squad. That was that 50 players? I think that is pretty close to what you'll get. Maybe a couple guys I'm wrong on. Then you're going to have on special teams, John Weeks, the long snapper, Thomas Morstead, your punter, and maybe the most polarizing guy of all, Jake Moody as your kicker. Let the groans begin. I know. We don't like Jake Moody here on the show. Wish he was better than he was. But it seems like they are going to allow Jake Moody to lose them some football games before they make a real decision on his future. However, I do think Greg Joseph should be on speed dial because, my God, I am not looking forward to riding the Jake Moody roller coaster this season. We have a question here in the YouTube chat from the 49ers 2025. They ask, isn't this the second ACL tear for Mustafa? He's only torn it once. He re-injured his ACL, but I don't believe he tore it. That is a big distinction to be made, and I think was one of the biggest issues that ESPN's Nick Wagner was trying to clean up, because the aggregators kept saying he retore his ACL. He did not. He did not. He injured the ACL, but did not tear the ACL. Big distinction there. He'll be on the PUP list. And look, right there in itself, the PUP list, you're out for 4 weeks minimum. Thus, on week 5 against the Rams, you could see the likes of Mustafa, Brandon Aiyuk, and Yetur Gross-Matos all return, thus needing to make more roster moves and cuts along the way. So there is a lot more moves that will be done after roster cut down day. We know this. You can't even dress 53 guys. So what we will label as the final 53 tomorrow at 1 p.m. will not be the final 53, probably on Wednesday. But that's kind of all I have for you today. That is my final 53-man roster prediction for the San Francisco 49ers. If you missed it, I will go all the way through it again. Quarterbacks, I have Brock Purdy and Mac Jones. I have Tanner Mordecai being brought back be the practice squad, and Curtis Rourke on the NFI list, missing the entire 2025 season. Running back, I have Christian McCaffrey, Brian Robinson, Isaac Guerendo, and Jordan James, with Patrick Taylor Jr., Corey Kiner on injured reserve, and Jeff Wilson Jr. being brought back on the practice squad. Fullback is Kyle Juszczyk. Him kind of being a quasi tight end fullback allows San Francisco to only carry 3 tight ends to begin the season. George Kittle, Luke Farrell, and Braden Willis beats out Jake Tunges, who I have being brought back on the practice squad as well. Getting back to receiver, I have Ricky Pearsall, Jauan Jennings, Jordan Watkins, Russell Gage, and Skyy Moore, with Jacob Cowing on injured reserve to begin the season. Alongside him is Brandon Aiyuk on the PUP list, and DeMarcus Robinson being suspended. On the practice squad, though, I have Robbie Chosen Anderson and rookie 7th-round pick Junior Burgeon. Yes, Junior Burgeon on the practice squad. Here's where it gets polarizing again and controversial. Offensive line, I have Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, Colt McKivitz, Spencer Burford, Connor Colby, Austin Pleasance, and not my choice but theirs, Nick Zakelj, with Matt Hennessy and Drew Moss hopefully being brought back on the practice squad, with Isaac Alarson on the suspended list to begin the season. On defense, the defensive line, I have Nick Bosa, Alfred Collins, Mykel Williams, Bryce Huff, CJ West, Evan Anderson, Samuel Kawanu, Jordan Elliott, Kalia Davis, and Robert Beal Jr. because of Yetur Gross-Matos' injury not going well with the recovery. I think they carry the extra edge rusher, unfortunately, over Sebastian Valdez, who, again, in a perfect world, is brought back via the practice squad alongside veteran Travis Gibson. On top of that, then I have Kevin Givens and Bradley Anea on the injured reserve list to start the season. Linebacker, Fred Warner, D. Winters, Nick Martin, Luke Gifford, Tatum Bethune, Curtis Robinson. The practice squad guys are Stone Blanton and Chazz Surratt. Maybe Jalen Graham is there. Would love him back. He finally looked like an NFL-ready linebacker. Maybe he gets traded. San Francisco has traded linebackers like Jonas Griffin in the past for a 5th-round pick. So maybe there is room there for a San Francisco trade. In regards to cornerback, it's Lenore, Green, Stout, Flowers, Lucas, and Saran Neal over Darrell Luter Jr., who cut, traded. We shall see tomorrow. And then Trey Brown and Jacob Robinson on injured reserve, with Jair Brown, Jason Pinnock, Richie Grant, and Marquise Siegel as your safeties, with Jalen Mahoney on the practice squad and Malik Mustafa on the PUP list, with Thomas Morstead, John Weeks, and Jake Moody on special teams. It's a lot, I know, but 53 men will be on the roster tomorrow. Let's hope I'm wrong. I don't mind being wrong in the case of Drew Moss and Sebastian Valdez, but we shall see how close I can get. One final question from Big Brick 84 in the YouTube chat. They ask, Sterling, do you think Kevin Givens needs to be on season-ending injured reserve with the pec injury? I'd rather keep the IR return designation for Cowing and Jauan Jennings if they need more time. I don't. I think you want to keep your options open. You can always have guys be on IR and not brought back. That's okay. But I think they're going to kind of hold things off and try to give themselves as much versatility as they can going into cut down day. And look, the deadline may say 1 p.m. Their roster is not going to get announced until like 2:30. It always is late. They're never announcing it on time. So it'll be a long-awaited announcement tomorrow. So we shall see. But I do not think Kevin Givens needs to be on season-ending injured reserve. I think he'll get placed on IR afterwards. And to your point, I really don't even like having Cowing being one of the IR designation returns. So I'd flip those. I'd rather have Givens than Cowing back, but, you know, that depends on the health of Aiyuk and the return of DeMarcus Robinson. So, yeah. But let's see what happens tomorrow. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the extra Twitter. At 49ers.access is the Instagram. You can use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. I want to thank every single one of you listening on the audio podcasting platforms and on YouTube. Don't forget to come right back here to this very channel for a reaction to the final 53 roster that San Francisco announced tomorrow. Maybe some trades happen, maybe some cuts happen. We are going to react to it all tomorrow live, directly after the announcement. So stay tuned for that. Hope you'll rejoin us then. And as always, my name is Sterling Bennett. And until next time, until the final 53 are announced, stay faithful.